Class 8 Science, Physics, Chapter Friction. When we stop pedaling a bicycle, it gradually slows down and finally comes to a stop. No force appears to be acting on the ball, yet the speed gradually decreases and it comes to rest after some time. The force responsible for changing the state of motion of ball is the force of friction. That is the contact force. Friction. Whenever an object moves or tends to move over the surface of another object, there is a force acting between the two surfaces in contact. Force of friction. The force of friction always acts on all the moving objects and its direction is always opposite to the direction of motion. Cause of friction. Due to force of friction of the wooden surface, the car comes to rest. Due to the force of friction of the tablecloth, the car comes to rest. Where do you think the car covered a greater distance? Why did this happen? As we can already see that when the car moves directly without the tablecloth, it travels more distance. Now let us take a look why it happened. This is because of the roughness of the surface in contact. So force of friction depends on the nature of the two surfaces in contact. So when there is a tablecloth, the surfaces is not smooth. That's why the car did not go further distance. So whenever the roughness decreases, the force of friction also decreases. Whenever roughness increases, the force of friction also increases. All surfaces have some roughness on them. In the smooth surface, till the block comes to rest. Why is that so? When the two surfaces are put in contact, the irregularities, that is, ups and downs, of one surface get somewhat interlocked with the irregularities of the other surface. Force is applied, but that force is not able to set the body in motion. Let us understand why. Activity. Let us take a block, a spring balance, now when we apply some force, let us see what we have observed. The reading of the spring balance changes, but the block does not move. This reading gives the measure of the force of friction between the block and the wooden surface. Now let us put more blocks. When you apply some force, what do you observe? The reading of the spring balance changes, but the block does not move. This reading gives the measure of the force of friction between the blocks and the wooden surface. Spring balance. Spring balance is a simple device that can be used for measuring the force acting on an object. It consists of a coiled spring which gets stretched when a force is applied to it. At the top, there is a ring and there is a pointer. Stretching of the spring is measured by a pointer moving on a graduated scale. The standard unit of force is 1 Newton. The force is said to be 1 Newton if it produces an acceleration of 1 meter per second square in a body of mass 1 kg. Factors affecting friction. Point number 1. Nature of the two surfaces in contact. Point number 2. Force pressing the two surfaces together. Types of friction. Static friction, so let us see what do we find. This force is not sufficient to overcome the friction. So here the force is applied and in the opposite direction the force or friction is working. But the force that we are applying, that is not sufficient to overcome the friction. That's why it is not moving the block. Now let us see why does this happen. The box remains at rest. When an external force acts on the box, the force of friction acting is known as static friction. This static friction balances the force which we exert on the box and the box remains at rest. So let us see what do we find. This force is also not sufficient to overcome the friction. Why does this happen? The box still remains at rest. This static friction balance the force which we exert on the box, and the box remains at rest. When we applied force is increased to 2F, the static friction is also increased to 2F. Force of static friction increases of the applied force. Static friction is a self-adjusting force. The force required to overcome friction at the instant an object starts moving from the rest is a measure of static friction. Sliding friction. What do we find? This force is sufficient to overcome the friction. This force of friction is known as sliding friction or, or kinetic friction. The force required to keep the object moving with the same speed is a measure of sliding. Static and sliding friction. Let us take a block. When some weight is added to the pan, this force is sufficient to overcome the friction. Graph for friction. In x-axis, it is applied force. In y-axis, the force of friction is given. And the straight line is the static friction. Static friction is equal and opposite to the applied force. It can increases only unto a certain upper limit, that is the limiting friction. The force of limiting friction depends on the nature of the surfaces in contact. Sliding friction is always a little less than the limiting friction as well as static friction. Why is sliding friction less than static friction? The block doesn't move. This is because of the interlocking between the irregularities. Once the interlockings have unlocked, the block starts moving. Once the motion starts, the contact points on one surface do not get enough time to lock into the contact points of the other surface. Rolling friction. Why do the bag have wheels? It makes it easy for the person to pull the bag, thus reducing friction. Such a friction is called as rolling friction. Activity to understand rolling friction. Let us take a block on top of some pencils. When some weight is added to the pan, So, the force of friction that comes into play when one body rolls over the surface of another body. So, what we observed in the previous slide, that whenever the weight is applied, the pencil rolled, and that's why the block moves. So, this is called the rolling friction. Static friction, it exists between two surfaces in contact between which there is no relative motion. Sliding friction, it exists between two objects when one of them is sliding over the surface of the other. Rolling friction, it exists between two objects when one of them is rolling over the other. Static friction is greater than sliding friction, and sliding friction is greater than rolling friction. Wheel, a revolutionary invention. The wheel has been considered one of the greatest inventions in the history of mankind. Where do you think the force of friction to pull the bag will be less? It is obviously A. In some cases, friction is a necessity and it is also a evil. Now let us take a look in which cases friction is a necessity, like walking on the ground. How is walking related to friction? It is friction between the ground and our feet, that is shoes, that enables us to walk. When we walk, we push the ground and our feet in the backward direction, that is the action. Friction then provides the forward reaction and makes us move forward. If friction between our feet and ground were absent, it would not be possible to walk. Point number 2, that is for rolling. The friction between the tires or wheels and the road is necessary for vehicles move safely. If there were no friction, the tires of vehicles will go on spinning at the same place and will not move forward at all. If the friction becomes less than the specified value, the wheel or tire can lose their grip of the road. Now, point number 3, performing small day to day activities. Writing with a pen or a pencil on a paper is possible only because of friction. Now, where friction is the evil. Point number 1, loss of energy. Friction consumes a substantial part of the useful energy available to us. As friction opposes motion between two objects in contact, some of the energy to move the object is wasted in overcoming friction. Only a part of energy obtained from its fuel is used up in running the vehicle. Major part is wasted in heating the machine. Friction between the ground and tires and sound produced. A significant amount of energy supplied to machine gets wasted in the form of heat energy while overcoming the force of friction. Point number 2, wear and tear of objects. Friction is responsible for a lot of wear and tear of moving parts. It is friction which wears out surface rubbing against each other. Hence, the moving parts of any machines needs to be replaced from time to time. Methods of increasing friction. Whenever friction is required, it is increased by making a surface rough. The threads and groups improve their grip on the road. This increases the friction to desired value and helps us to avoid skidding or slipping. Sportsmen and players use special types of sport shoes with spikes on their soles. This helps them to have better grip on the while running. Methods of reducing friction. Point number 1, polishing. When we polish a surface, its roughness, that is the unevenness, decreases. The surface becomes smooth and the friction gets reduced. We also sometimes rub the surface with a fine sandpaper to reduce the unevenness. Point number 2, lubrication. When a few drops of oil are poured on the hinges of a door, the door moves much more smoothly. Bicycle and motor mechanics use grease between the moving parts of these machines. Oil like substances, which, when put on a surface, help to reduce friction, are called lubricants. That reduces wear and tear. It also increases the efficiency by less wastage of energy. Lubricants can be liquid like oils, semi liquids like grease, solids like talcum powder. Point number 3, ball bearings. Rolling friction is smaller than sliding friction. Sliding can be replaced by rolling in most machines by use of ball bearings. We use ball bearings in shafts of motors, dynamos, axles of vehicles, etc. Fluid friction. Whenever an object moves over the surface of another object, frictional force, that is the solid friction, comes to play. But what happens when an object moves through air? The air also exerts a force of friction even though it is very thin and light. We call this friction as air resistance, and it also opposes the motion of objects through it. Activity to understand force of fluid friction. Let us take a sheet of paper, crumble sheet of paper, drop both of them at the same time. What do you observe? The crumbled sheet of paper falls with a greater speed. Why did this happen? This is because of the resistance of air. Air resistance acts to the direction opposite to the direction of motion of paper. Factors affecting force of fluid friction. Point number 1. Nature of the fluid. Point number 2. Shape of the moving object. 3. Speed of the moving object. Aeroplane. Ship. Where do you think the shapes of these machines got inspired from? That is from the bird. Fish. So, aeroplane is made from the inspired from the bird, and ship is made by inspired from the fish. Sport vehicles are so designed that the air flows smoothly over their surface. That is called the streamline flow. That's why in sport vehicles they have the streamlined bodies. Nature gives some useful ideas to the mankind. Streamlined flow of air helps to reduce the friction of air and helps them acquire a faster speed. Thank you. Please subscribe to my channel to get more updated videos of different topics.